Hey there.
Hi,
Hey,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Hey, good to see you.
Great to see
Okay.
you.
Rabbi, I loved all your beautiful menorahs.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Yeah, we've got a little menorah collection.
You do.
I imagine.
We don't have kids at home anymore to light them all, so we have to have people come over. Unfortunately, we couldn't have anybody come over this year.
We were all over.
That's true. You were all over. We didn't give you a match, I guess. We should have given you all matches. But no, thank you guys. And thank you so much for your generosity, the two of you. I know that you were able to help us with a gift this year, which is really appreciated. It's not, look, we're not struggling like some people, but some synagogues are really having a hard time right now, but it makes a big difference. We've had a commitment to do more this year, not less.
But we were glad to do it.
We're trying to and again, everybody here has been helpful, but we're working on trying to get a message out to people that this year could not put us down. And we were able, guys, if you were closer, you would have gotten a challah delivered to your house. We delivered a couple hundred challahs in the end to people. So but again, participating in this class for us, for me, for our congregation's been a really big part of our getting through this time, and it's been critical for, I think, keeping my sanity and keeping a schedule and kind of making sense of a week. Shabbos always gives me that. I always have a Shabbat to look forward to. I always have that. But it's almost like if you don't have other stuff going on in the week, when what is Shabbos anyways? It's already, I've told this to people. We don't go out on Shabbat. We don't leave the house generally, unless we're going to synagogue or we're going to some Jewish, simcha, not a wedding during the day, obviously, but bar mitzvah, whatever, we'll go out. But now nobody can go out ever here, so it's not like it's any different. Tuesday was no different than Friday, but and honestly, I mean, it's literally like Saturday we're home, but Sunday we were home too. So it's hard to make those distinctions of days. But Wednesday night is Torah study, and Tuesday morning's midrash class, and those things during my week kind of articulate and punctuate the week and make it feel like, I have a schedule and I have things that I have to, that I have to be at, and I get to dress up, take off my pajamas. I'm not wearing pajamas. I really don't wear pajamas, but for class, but whatever. But it's obviously it's not the same as seeing everybody and being able to interact in person. We're missing that, but man, this has really been a key part of my keeping my sanity over these last months. And
for me too, it's been very important.
Yeah. And you're staying safe, Joyce?
Yes, I am. I'm staying home and staying safe. I do go out once every 2 to 3 weeks and buy groceries and come right back home. My big deal out.
Have they given you any? I guess you can't take the vaccine, right? So
No.
So can they tell you anything about like what? I guess nobody knows when it's going to be safer for you, right?
Well, as I read more and more, and as I've been hearing more and more things from people, I don't think this COVID flu is so dangerous. The death rate is very low. It's lower than from the regular flu. More people, hundreds more people die of heart attacks. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. I know my kids are worried and they want me to be safe, and I will be. But, I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm not threatened.
What have your doctor said to you?
You're not getting the vaccine and you're going to be all right.
Okay.
He said it.
All right.
He said, I wouldn't give it to you. You got so sick last 2 times. So I won't get the vaccine. I'm not worried about it. I really am not worried about
Did
it.
they tell you that they wanted a certain amount of vaccines out there before it's safer for you? Did anybody talk to you about that?
No, no, I feel safe. I'm sorry. I really do. I don't think I'm going to get sick. I don't think this particular virus is that deadly. I really, really don't. I think that people that do have problems have premorbidity, they have diabetes, they have heart conditions, they were hit by a car, some of them. Some of the ones they're calling COVID deaths took place in hospice. They were already not very well, dying. I just am not going to worry about it. I'm going to be fine. And I feel fine. I look fine. I'm happy.
Okay. Well, we will tell you that if anyone's going to bounce back, but we don't want you to do anything that's going to jeopardize your health. I know I'm speaking on behalf of your family and
Thank you.
of everybody who loves you in our community. We can't afford for you to get sick. And definitely while the hospitals are full, I've been keeping a low profile. I go out. I told Harvey this the other day. I go out of bed every other day. Not even every other day, like 2 times a week to do groceries and bake. And I combine all my errands into one outing. I'll do 3 or 4 things, do everything I have to do out, and then come back. I'm not going out right now. I'm worried about, if I spread it. Tracy got tested again 2 days ago. She's been tested, I think 6 or 7 times. But yeah, I don't want to get anybody sick. And while I'm not personally as worried about it, I definitely don't want to spread it if I'm asymptomatic. I'd
That
feel
makes sense.
horrific if I got somebody sick. That's what I've told you. I'm not. I don't know if I'm. I've seen. I've visited. I've worn a mask, but I visited Joyce a few times during this time, and I've been very careful. But I feel I'd be devastated if I got you sick.
But I needed your visit. I was in mourning, and that was more important to me than staying away from germs. And you did. You sat more than 6 feet away, and you were very helpful to me.
I probably shouldn't have said anything right now because there's probably some people thinking that right now that I might not. I maybe did something wrong. So I will tell you.
Rabbi, getting off this subject,
Yes.
I was home doing nothing today. Turned on the History Channel. They had I guess a whole day of a mini series called The Bible. Did you ever see that?
Which one?
I saw it
Was
today.
it one? Was it one that Richard Friedman was on? My professor, Dick Friedman.
No, this is it's like a document, or not really. It's like a long movie. It's a mini series, starting with really Noah and going all the way through Jesus.
But it's it's interviewing people about
No.
it.
It's
No.
like a story.
It's like a play.
It was really done horribly.
Yes, I couldn't watch it. I watched it and then I got rid of it. It was horrible.
I
horrible
think I know what you're
they skipped-
talking. I think I know what you're talking about because I've seen pretty much every Bible movie made. So
They actually skipped over Jacob.
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I think it was an Italian produced film series or mini series. I think it was produced by Italians. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was.
So
So
they had
Mike,
Jesus
was that a public service announcement to not watch that particular?
Exactly. Do
Thank
not watch.
Is there anything
Yeah.
else we shouldn't watch?
Don't watch Joseph Prince. I flipped to his channel. Amen. I don't.
That's a crazy
Yes.
Of all the televangelists, that guy is nuts. I mean,
Doesn't
that
make any
guy
sense.
out of control.
Yeah.
He's Filipino, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, no, that one's a weird one. That one I think loses something, and I don't. If you're not crazy, I think it loses something. But anyways, I'm not here to bash things on TV. And I will tell you that yeah, we're gonna go on to TV. We're going on. I'm gonna just reminded me to put us on Facebook. But we have. I do want to say something about TVs right now, since we're talking to TV. I'm going to segue to my favorite channel. I'm going to segue to my favorite channel, JLTV, which hopefully most of you have.
Yeah.
We have some very exciting news that just happened this week, and you guys, or last week, and you guys are some of the first people that I've told. And that is JLTV last week went into an agreement with one of the biggest producers of Israeli television programs to bring to the United States, to commercial cable television, not network television. Well, it's the JLTV network. We have the two of the greatest shows ever to come out of Israel will be airing on JLTV in 2021. One of them you may have already seen. I know some of you have already seen it because I've recommended it. One of my favorite things on Netflix, and that is Fauda. So Fauda will be available on JLTV starting next year. And if you haven't seen Fauda, you'll have a chance to see it because we'll stream it on the network. So Fauda is an amazing show about the operatives, the Shin Bet operatives that go into the West Bank and Gaza and poses as Arabs to gather intelligence and stop attacks. It's real. It's a real unit. So Fauda is Arabic for chaos, and it is a very, very captivating show. So that's going to be on JLTV. And what also is going to be on, it's a 2-season, it only did 2 seasons. It's called Prisoners of War, or Hatufim in Hebrew. And for those who know that,
Yes.
it was originally what Homeland is based on. So it's the original Homeland. So if people like Homeland, or even if you've not watched Homeland on Showtime, but know what I'm talking about, this is the one that started it. This is the original Israeli version of Homeland. So a lot of people haven't seen this yet. So it's 2 seasons, and that's also going to be coming on JLTV next year. So we're very excited to bring those to wider audiences and to people who don't watch streaming television. So I wasn't necessarily going to tell you about it, but I'm very excited about it because I personally love Fauda, and we're going to have the actors on. I'll have some days, and I'll let you know when I'll be interviewing the actors and promoting the show, the series, and so we're very excited about it. So, anyways, that's a little bit about TV, a little bit about the media, if you will, and we're going to be doing some stuff on through the temple that will air on the network and vice versa. And so we're trying to leverage some of that power. So there's going to be some really good stuff I'm working on for 2021. We started scratching the surface, and we're going to get to some really good stuff. So keep your eyes peeled, and you will be the first to know because I see you every week, my friends. So we're gonna look at the Torah portion today. And what was so interesting, as I said last week, is we finished. And by the way, we had a little glitch yesterday on Tuesday, and my wife had a glitch today on Zoom. And I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen tonight. But I don't know if it's Zoom wide or it's just in our house. But we had a little bit of technical glitches. So I'm going to keep things very simple today. I'm not going to play any videos. I'm not going to push it, but I'm going to bring up the Torah portion right now, and we'll have a chance to look at it. And I'm going to do something today. We're going to, as I mentioned last week, we finished midstream. That's the way the Torah portion does it. It finishes in the middle of the story, and that doesn't happen a lot. Usually, a Torah portion ends and you know the new chapter kind of begins a new story or a new part of a story. This one, my friends, is the cliffhanger. It ended with a cliffhanger, like, as I mentioned, like the old serials in I'm not even dating myself because I never really saw those in the movie theater, but the serials that ran in the old days, or in the days of radio, when people would listen to a radio serial and then all of a sudden they'd end with the cliffhanger, which, because somebody was hanging off a cliff. That's what's happening in this week's portion. The Parshat Vayigash literally is, and then Judah went up. So you really have to look at the previous couple paragraphs. What's happened here, to refresh everyone's memory from the last, if we're going to show in last week's episode, what happened? Judah, the reason that Judah is standing in front of Joseph right now is, if you recall, the brothers all come down to Joseph, who's they don't know is now the head of Egypt. He's the second only to Pharaoh. And there's a famine in the land, and they've come down in the whole world, not just in the land. They've come down begging for food, the brothers, the other 10 brothers. And originally they come down without Benjamin because their father, Jacob, will not let the youngest go. And they get food, they get loaded up, they go back home, and then they run out of food. And what was interesting was when Joseph last gave them the food, without telling them who he was, he said, don't come back here again unless you bring your youngest brother, Benjamin. And what was so interesting about that story was that Shimon, one of the other sons, the second oldest son, is essentially held hostage in case they come back and they don't bring that Shimon is going to be killed. So this is a really weird story. So essentially the brothers have to talk, and this is what we left off. They had to talk Jacob into letting the brothers go back with Benjamin. And Jacob says, look, I already lost Joseph a long time ago. I've now lost Shimon, and now I'm going to lose Benjamin. So I'm going to lose, I have a lot of sons, but I'm going to lose 3 sons. So I can't do it. And they say, look, if he doesn't come down, we all die. And using that logic, they get Benjamin to go. Now, of course, what we just left with is that Joseph plays a trick on the brothers and basically makes them think that Benjamin stole his special goblet. And what does that mean? It means that Benjamin is now going to have to essentially be punished for it, or be kept, or whatever. And so Joseph again confronts the brothers. The last things we read were, what's this you've done? Do you not know that a man like me practices divination? Which of course he doesn't need a cup for that. He's got God, but he does do some pretty wild magic. He can interpret dreams. And Judah, right, the 4th oldest brother, and the one who kind of steps up, says, what can we say, my Lord? How can we plead? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered the crime of your servants. Here we are, we're your slaves. The rest of us as much as he who's in possession of the goblet. So they said, if Benjamin stole it, we're all guilty too. And then Joseph says, no, far be it from me to do that. Only the one who stole it is going to be punished. The rest of you can go back. Now, we pick up the story. But we have to remember one thing from Judah back 7 chapters ago. In chapter 37, it was Judah's idea to sell Joseph as a slave in the first place. Judah, the 4th oldest brother, and arguably the key to the story. Because as we know, Joseph is a pretty important man, but Judah, folks, is the ancestor of King David and the Davidic line. It's his tribe that become the leaders of our people. Now we're going to take a look at this story. And this is the story that, again, that's the continuation from the previous week. But I actually want you to look, and we're not going to just focus on this story, because there's a part of the next part of this story that most people don't read, or they don't know about, or they don't talk about, because it seems trivial. It seems like it's not part of the narrative that we even have to pay attention to. And there are people who've read this story in Genesis many times and have never paid attention to the chapter that we're going to look at, which again is not the obvious chapter, but I think this year in particular can speak to us in a very, very relevant way and in a way that you may not have thought. Not that this story isn't a great story. It's a great story of dysfunction and people figuring it all out and forgiveness. That's all great. But there's another piece here which has to do with, believe it or not, economics, which has to do with national crises, which may be, again, one of the most underrated, paid attention to, what, that's not the word, but unexposed, and really maybe one of the more important lines of the Torah. We'll take a look at it. So here we go. Vayigash alav Yehuda. Judah went up to him. That's what Vayigash means. He went up to him. He approached him, meaning Joseph. And he says, please, my Lord, let your servant appeal to my Lord, and do not be impatient with your servant, you who are equal of Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servants, us, these brothers, have you a father or another brother? And again, this is the retelling, which is why I didn't spend a lot of time on it, because Judah's going to remind you. We told my Lord, we have an old father and there's a child of his old age. The youngest, his full brother, is dead, so that he alone is left of his mother, and his father dotes on him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me that I may set eyes on him. And we said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father. If he were to leave him, his father would die. Because Benjamin is the last son of Rachel, the last one. Joseph, our brother, is gone. Now, of course, he's not, but they think he is. But you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, do not let me see your faces. When we came back to your servant, my father, we reported my Lord's words to him. Later, our father said, go back and procure some food for us. And remember, that was only after they begged and pleaded with Jacob to let him go down. We answered, we cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us can we go down, for we may not show our faces to the man unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said to us, as you know, pay attention to this, my wife bore me 2 sons, but one is gone from me. And I said, alas, he was torn by a beast, and I have not seen him since. So Judah is now repeating Jacob's words to the person who actually was the one they thought was, or they knew what had happened, but the one that the father thought, Jacob thought, was torn by the beast. They're actually telling Joseph's story to Joseph. I mean, think about the irony of that. But here's the weird thing. They say he was torn by a beast, and I have not seen him since. Now, did that mean that he was torn by a beast and didn't die? Yes, is it possible that Jacob never really thought that he was dead, or that he didn't see the body, or what does that mean? Jacob's words, as Judah tells him, is if you take this one from me, and he actually does say this, we read this, if you take this one from me too, and he meets with disaster, you will send my white head down to Sheol in sorrow, which is another way of saying you will kill me. You will kill me. I will die a completely destroyed man. So that is the repetition of what Jacob said before they left. And so Judah continues in his words. Now, if I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, since his own life is so bound up with his, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will send the white head of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in grief. And again, they keep using here the word servant, of avadecha, avadim shelcha. We are your slaves. We are your servants. He never says, we guys, us people. He says, we your servants. He says that word over and over again, folks. Now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, I shall stand guilty before my father forever. Therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my Lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. And so here Judah says to his brother, Joseph, not knowing it's Joseph, I am willing to give up my life for that boy, Benjamin. Judah has now done a complete act of repentance.
Mhm.
A complete act. For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be witness to the woe that would overtake my father. Now look, Judah already caused woe to his father because he's the one who essentially cooperated and made sure that Joseph was gone and that the father thought he was dead. But now he says, let this boy, let me take his place. Let me take Benjamin, my brother's place. Now, what's so powerful about this is that Joseph and Benjamin both have the same mother. They're both sons of Rachel. So now Judah has proven to Joseph, I'm not standing in place of Reuben, my full brother. I'm not standing in place of Levi or any of my other brothers that are not Rachel's sons. I'm willing to stand in place of that family, that part of the family that you were a part of, the part of the family that maybe you thought the reason why we hated you so much was because you were Rachel's son. Remember, Judah is Leah's son, the wife that Jacob didn't want in the first place. So think about what Judah and the other brothers, the older brothers, were walking around with all the time, knowing that their mother was not loved the same way, as much, maybe at all, by the man that was their father, and that was the father of two boys that he spoils. Now, I'm not going to ruin it for you by telling you that this happens all the time. This isn't just biblical.
Mhm.
This happens a lot in blended families, as we call them today. Somebody's got a different mother. Somebody's a stepson. Somebody's a half brother. Somebody's this. Happens too often. And what Judah just did was say to Joseph, first of all, if I did something horrible before to you, which of course he doesn't know this, I have made repentance for it, should be forgiven for it. And guess what? Maybe now Joseph has to sit with this, because Joseph knows that Judah doesn't know who he is. Maybe Joseph just suddenly realized, maybe it wasn't because of my mom all this whole time. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was my behavior that my brothers didn't like. Maybe it wasn't my parent that they didn't like, the mother, the favored wife that they were jealous of. Maybe they just didn't like me. And so Joseph is now got to deal with the revelation of redemption and of forgiveness and of unknowingly this teshuvah, this repentance that Judah just did. And some people call it the ultimate act of repentance. And it's a very powerful scene in the Bible. Because what happens to Joseph? He could no longer control himself before his attendants. And he cried out, have everyone get away, get out of here, withdraw from me. So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. His sobs, though, and that should be there, his sobs, though, were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and the news reached Pharaoh's palace. So think about the way that has to be choreographed, dramatized. Joseph sent everyone out so they wouldn't see it. It didn't matter. He cried so loud that everybody knew something happened. I mean, that's a really powerful scene. Really powerful. There's a saying about what Judah does right now, this level of repentance. That when somebody repents to this level of true repentance, not because they have to prove to somebody that they've done, that they've turned a corner, that they're a different person. When somebody unknowingly repents completely, and by that we're not saying they're asking for an apology or they're saying, I'm sorry, what can I do? When they come back to the same moment where they can do the same thing, make a mistake. At the moment that Joseph said to Judah, I only want Benjamin to be a slave, Judah could have said, yeah, I hear you. He'll stay, and walk out. I'll have to tell Dad, he's old anyways. That's not what Judah did. Judah risked his life and was willing to give up his life now for that brother. That's the ultimate act of redemption. So this is not repentance. This is not like I said I was sorry. This is the highest act. But the teaching about this is that when somebody does this, it's literally like the universe gets repaired. I mean, things like this, when they happen, they change the world. And there's a saying that while Joseph was righteous, and he's called Joseph the Tzaddik, Joseph the righteous, it's Judah that winds up being the son who's the descendant, the ancestor, and the descendant of Jacob and the ancestor of King David, that the leadership, that the kings of the Jews come from. The fact is the Messiah, according to Judaism, is Moshiach ben David. David is the descendant of Judah.
Wow.
Judah is the leader of leaders because he made this amazing act of contrition and repentance. And what it teaches us is that a leader who makes a mistake and admits it and says, I'm sorry, and not only I'm sorry, but I will not make that mistake again, that's somebody who has achieved a level of humanity that the righteous don't even have. And that's the teaching that the rabbi said, that when two people stand next to each other, one who sinned and repented fully, completely, and one who's never sinned, it's the person who's repented, who's actually recognized as the greater tzaddik, as the greater holy person, because it's so easy to not really come back. And if you've never fallen, I hate to say it, but maybe you haven't been in a situation where you made a mistake. I mean, we all have. Most of us haven't almost killed a brother, but when somebody does something and then literally is willing to give up their life to make amends and really proves that they wouldn't do that same thing again, that's a really, really special thing. And that's what just happened. And so Joseph is just overcome by emotion, and he can't hold it back. And this is what happens. Joseph said to his brothers, I'm Joseph. Ani Yosef, I'm Joseph. Those two words, I'm Joseph. But then he says, is my father still well? And we mentioned this before. That's a critical phrase. Because did Joseph not in the back of his mind still have some type of disconnect from his father? Now, the rabbis don't want to have that. The rabbis don't want to say that Joseph has some disconnect here. But there's that unanswered question, folks. Why in the last 10 years, almost, 2 years have already elapsed of the famine, 7 good years of the plenty, 10 years has elapsed since Joseph has been in power. In 10 years, he doesn't send a message to Jacob saying, I'm okay, I didn't die. He has the most powerful army in the world. He has the greatest communication services in the world. I mean, it's horse. It's a guy on a horse, but he's got like all the horses. He doesn't send a message to his father that he's okay. That's a question, folks. Couldn't do it while he was in prison. Maybe couldn't do it while he's the slave in Potiphar's house. Is he wondering if his father ever came looking for him? Is he wondering in the back of his mind, did my father send me out to get me killed in the first place? What are the thoughts in Joseph's mind for the last 20 years that he's been in Egypt?
Mhm.
I've forgotten my life back there. I didn't want to think about it anymore until these guys come back down and remind me that I still have a family there. It's a really powerful human story of forgiveness. And as we said before, it's probably why it's the end of the book of Genesis, to let you know that people can forgive. The book of Genesis begins with two brothers, one that kills the other. Cain kills Abel over something we don't even know. Here, when a brother has the power to wipe out all the other brothers without batting an eye, I mean, just nothing for the vice president of Egypt to just kill everybody. Doesn't happen. On the contrary, they were so dumbfounded they could not answer him. Couldn't speak to him. Couldn't speak. Joseph said to his brothers, come forward to me. Same root. Geshuna. That's what Vayigash is. Come, approach, come to me. And when they came forward, he said, I am your brother Joseph, he whom you sold into Egypt. And so here he doesn't just say, I am Joseph, right?
Mhm.
Before he said, I'm Joseph. What does that even mean, right? I'm Joseph. I mean, no, you can't be that Joseph. Now he says to them, Yosef Echav, I am Joseph, your brother. Which isn't, I'm Joseph, the guy who could kill you or may want to kill you. I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold to Egypt. You and I, we all have a relationship. But don't be, Vata, do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me here. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. There's a purpose here, folks. My brothers, you can be mad at yourselves, but look at how it's come to pass. It's now 2 years that there's been a famine in the land, and there's still 5 years to come in which there'll be no yield from tilling. There's not going to be any food. God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. I'm going to redeem you, deliver you. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his household, and ruler over the whole land of Egypt. So he just told the brothers, this was the divine plan. That's the way Joseph's now made sense of this. Now remember, he dreams, and so maybe he dreamt this all along. This is the fruition of my brothers will bow down to me, and guess what? It's going to be because I've now saved their lives. But he also does something that's clearly not very humble, because he says, I'm the one in charge. I'm the one who rules over the whole land of Egypt. Now that's what I want to talk about today. How this guy, Joseph, wound up being the ruler of Egypt. Well, you already heard. It's his idea to save up the food, etc. But what I'm going to show you today in that unrecognized chapter, if you will, you're going to see what this means. So here's what Joseph says. Now what do? Hurry back to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, where you will be near me, you and your children and your grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all that is yours. There I will provide you, for there are still 5 years of famine to come, that you and your household and all that is yours may not suffer want. You can see for yourselves, and my brother Benjamin for himself, that it is indeed I who are speaking to you. It is me, folks. I'm going to take care of you all. I know it's crazy, but it's really me. And you must tell my father everything about my high station in Egypt and all that you've seen, and bring my father here fast. With that, he embraced his brother Benjamin around the neck and wept. And Benjamin wept on his neck. So a lot of crying. And it reminds us a little bit of Jacob and Esau reconnecting and falling on their necks and weeping. But here, these are two brothers. There was no animosity between these two brothers, but these are the full brothers. And here's the thing that, Joseph understands, that his brother Joseph, who's their half brother, was not treated the way he was treated. And so perhaps he takes some joy and some comfort in the knowledge that life wasn't the same for Benjamin as it was for Joseph. Again, maybe he thinks it's partly my fault. Who knows? Whatever it is, Benjamin didn't have to live like this. But there's another really tragic thing that happens here in this scene, is that Joseph's brother Benjamin has grown up his entire life. Essentially since the time he was probably 3 or 4, 2 maybe, he's grown up without Joseph. These two full brothers, he hasn't seen his brother since he was a baby. Joseph hasn't set eyes on Benjamin since he was literally a toddler. And so in this moment, he's connecting with his brother, his full brother, his only full brother, that's been deprived of him for the last 20 years. His brother he never knew. So it's not only the brother he didn't know, it's his connection to his mom. When he looks into Benjamin's face, he sees his mom. He doesn't say that here, but that's what I've always read to it. Why is he crying? Because he's never going to see his mom again. His mom died, giving birth to Benjamin. But here he is holding the last piece of his mother. It's a pretty powerful scene. Get a little choked up thinking about it myself, but he kisses all his brothers, and he wept on them too. And only then were his brothers able to say anything. They still couldn't speak. They were so overcome that they couldn't speak. The biggest reveal in history, the biggest twist in history. The news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come. And Pharaoh and his courtiers were pleased. It went over well, the news. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, now Joseph's already told him, you're staying here. But now Pharaoh says it. Say to your brothers, do as follows, load up your beasts and go at once to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall live off the fat of the land. It's really a nice offer from Pharaoh. And you are bidden also, do as follows. Take from the land of Egypt wagons for your children and your wives, and bring your father here. And never mind your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt shall be yours. So don't even worry about bringing stuff back. You can, but you don't have to, because when you come here, you're going to have anything you want. Folks, we talk about Egypt and the fact that when we leave Egypt as slaves, we depart with treasure.
Mhm.
Well, guess what, folks? We came down with treasure. The Pharaoh showers us with the best. It's a great scene. Not only are you going to be taken care of, but you're going to be taken care of in style. That's the way we came to Egypt. We didn't come to Egypt penniless. I mean, there was a famine. But we came down there as a family of the most powerful man besides Pharaoh. And we were brought in as success. Folks, this was repeated throughout Jewish history. We know the stories of times and places where Jews came to the country with nothing, which is, by the way, most of our families' experiences when they came to this country, coming here with nothing. But folks, there were other times when Jews left one country, sometimes because they had no choice, like Spain. But sometimes they came with stuff. I mean, we believe that Jews were settling in Poland 1,000 years ago because the Polish nobility invited them to come in and to essentially become a middle class. They didn't come from Germany and from Western Europe, what was Ashkenaz. They didn't come to Poland and Eastern Europe with nothing for the most part. It's hard to know because it was 1,000 years ago. But what we have is a recollection of stories of Jews coming to Eastern Europe with at least enough to be middle class. The Polish nobility were hoping that the Jews would kind of be a buffer between them and the peasants, which of course ended up making for a lot of anti-Semitism. Pretty similar to what happens here to us now. And remember that many of those Jewish folks, well, not us, because we all somehow got lucky enough to have an ancestor who left from Poland or Russia, what we call the Pale of Settlement, and got their way to America.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a whole lot of descendants, let's say 4 or 5 million of the 6 million that died, including 3 million in Poland, that were descendants of those Ashkenazi Jews that came to Poland, not as peasants. Sometimes their lives were pretty harsh, especially under the Russians. But the Poles brought them there not to be peasants. Brought them there to be business people. Brought them there to run inns and to collect taxes and to to help with essentially a serfdom that the Polish nobility didn't want to deal with. That's the truth, folks. Very similar to this story. And that's not the only time that these kinds of things happened. There were Jews that went around and moved into different places in the Middle East, in Iraq and in Syria. And sometimes those Jews moved to other countries, not because they were poor, but because they were very successful. There were Persian Jewish merchants that moved to India, that moved the Baghdadi community. There was communities that moved to China 1,000 years ago, the Jews of Kaifeng, that moved there not as poor people, but as business people, as tradesmen, and as merchants. And that's how we came down to Egypt. Not as poor people. I mean, we were shepherds, but we had stuff. And not only that, the Egyptians gave us stuff to come there. You'll see. You'll see. I will get to the line. But think about how similar that story is to the story of what happened to the Jewish people 70 years ago, when many of them left Poland through an oven. So the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them the wagons as Pharaoh had commanded, and he supplied them with provisions for their journey. He paid them before they even came. To each of them, moreover, he gave a change of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave them 300 pieces of silver and several changes of clothing. And to his father he sent the following: 10 he-asses laden with the best things of Egypt, and then 10 she-asses laden with grain, bread, and provisions for his father on the journey. And he sent his brothers off on their way, and he told them, do not be quarrelsome on the way. Don't argue. They went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, Joseph is still alive. Yes, he is ruler over the whole land of Egypt. His heart went numb, for he did not believe him. By the way, sounds a little bit like the foreshadowing of Pharaoh's heart. Jacob's heart was numb. He couldn't believe it. His heart stopped. His heart stopped. But when they recounted all that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Enough, said Israel. Again, Jacob goes back and forth between those names. My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die. By the way, in that line there, doesn't sound like Jacob has any intention of staying in Egypt. I want to go see him before I die. He doesn't say, I'm going to go live with my son. I want to go see him. So it could be that at least there's one tradition that Jacob did not intend to stay there. Well, let's look at the next line. So Israel set out with all that was his, and he came to Beersheba, which again is the far, kind of the border, the southern border of Israel. It's in the Negev. It's right before he kind of crosses into Egyptian territory. So his last place in Israel, the last Jewish place that he comes to, the place of, again, seven, or the well of seven, or the well of an oath, he offered sacrifices there at Beersheba. And he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Not just his God, but again, remembering his generational connection to the land. To his father Isaac, who never left the land. Remember, Abraham went down to Egypt. He had gone up already up to Aram, to Syria. Isaac never left the land. And so there's an interesting scene here. One line. God called to Israel in a vision by night, Jacob, Jacob, and he answered,
Hineni.
You got it. Hineni. Here's a moment of Hineni for Jacob. Now you'd be thinking, what's the Hineni moment, right? It's not, he's going to meet his son. What's the Hineni moment? It's this right here.
God.
It's this right here. God said, I am God, the God of your father. Fear not to go down to Egypt, for I will make you there a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will also bring you back. And Joseph's hands shall close your eyes. So God tells Jacob, you're going to die there. You're going to die. You'll be with Joseph. I mean, that's good. And you will come back. You will come back. But assuming that's God's way of saying you're going to come back in a coffin. But he says it's going to be okay. Now, of course, God doesn't tell Jacob, your descendants are also going to be slaves in that nation.
Mm-mm.
He doesn't tell him that. Now, remember, you're going to say, well, why would he? Well, because God told Abraham, Jacob's grandfather, that his descendants would be. Now, did Abraham tell Isaac, and then Isaac? I mean, Abraham and Jacob actually knew each other. Did Abraham tell his grandson Jacob, your descendants will go down and be, your kids and grandkids will go down to Egypt, and then their family will become slaves? Did he tell him that? Maybe the Hineni moment is this tradition of, you're going to go to Egypt, but it's not going to be okay there, which is why God doesn't really say that again. He doesn't maybe have to say it again. But what he does do is he comforts Jacob with this line: your people, your family will become there a great nation. And that is 100% true.
Mhm.
As much as they were slaves, we became a nation. And there are the phrases, Goy Gadol, a great nation. You will become a nation there. And so Jacob is given a couple pieces of information here that comfort him and make him now prepared not just to visit, but to end his life there. That he'll be able to be with Joseph, and Joseph will be with him on his deathbed, which is very beautiful. Not just that you'll die in Egypt, you'll be reunited, but your son will be there on your deathbed. Pretty powerful. And more importantly, your family will become a nation there. So you have to do it. And that's the Hineni moment. It's tough, and it's going to be really tough because you going down there, that seals it. Now, again, we'll read in next week's portion, Jacob's body is indeed brought back and buried at the cave of Machpelah. But folks, this is a scene of immense power, even though it's just one or two lines here. Jacob literally is saying, okay, this is where my final chapter is going to take place. Not in the land of Israel. I don't get to die here. I'll be buried here, but I don't get to die here. In my land. This is my land. I mean, that's the other part of this. Not just that your descendants are maybe going to be slaves there that's hard. It's that you finally, after 20 years of exile in Assyria, you got to come back home. And now you have to finish your last part of your life, your last 20 years, not in the land of Israel, not in your homeland. So it's a tough message there. Also some good news, but
Also that God will be with him. I myself will go down with you.
Yep. Exactly. Very good point, Joyce. That you are not just going to be with your family and your loved ones, but I'm going to be with you, which
Yes.
of course means that I'm going to protect you, and that
Very
this is what you need to have. I will be with you. Yeah, absolutely. That's a tremendous comfort to him. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
So Jacob left. He left Beersheba. And the sons of Israel put their father Jacob and their children and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to transport him. And they took along their livestock and their wealth that they had amassed in the land of Canaan. So there, it's not just that they had the wealth that Pharaoh gave them. The Torah says right here that they had wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And they went down with those things too. They didn't leave them behind. They could have left them behind. The Pharaoh said, you can leave them behind. I'll give you more here. They come down with that too. Thus Jacob and all his offspring with him came to Egypt. And now we're going to have this great list here. He brought with him to Egypt his sons and his grandsons, his daughters and granddaughters, and all his offspring. And these are the names of the Israelites: Jacob and his descendants who came to Egypt. Jacob's firstborn, Reuben. Reuben's son, Enoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. And Shimon, second oldest. His sons, Yemuel, Yamin, Ohad, Yachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. So that means that Shimon had married a Canaanite woman. So there's Shimon, the guy who went into Shechem and killed his brother-in-law and the rest of the Shechemites because he didn't want her married to a Shechemite. He doesn't seem to have an issue having a Canaanite woman as a wife. Maybe she's one of the women that he took out of Shechem, because remember, they took the women out of that. It's a weird little, and by the way, little asterisk right there by Shimon, Canaanite woman. Okay, so Levi's sons were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Those are all going to be important because the Levites are descendant from those three tribes, the three subgroups, if you will, in the tribes of the Levites. Judah's sons, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerach. But remember, and Onan died in the land of Canaan. That's right. They died back in Genesis chapter 38. And Peretz's sons were Hezron and Hamul. So Peretz has sons. It doesn't say that Zerach has sons here, but he does later. Don't worry. He does have sons later. They're twins, by the way, Peretz and Zerach. Issachar, he had sons, Tola, Puva, Eob, and Shimron. Zebulun's sons, Sered, Elon, and Yachleel. Those were sons whom Leah bore to Jacob in Padan Aram, in addition to his daughter Dinah. Persons in all, male and female, 33. So notice how they organize the kids by their mother, by their mothers. Yep. And again, in the order of how they were married then, but not in the order that they were born, because Issachar and Zvulun were the 8th and 9th kids of the 9th and 10th kids of Jacob, and after the other sons had been born. And now we get to God's sons, Ziphion, Hagi, Shuni, Ezbon, Eri, Arodi, and Areli. Asher's sons, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Beriah, and their sister, Serach. So there we get another woman, Serach. That's Asher's daughter, a granddaughter. Interesting, right? Serach, as we've talked about in the Tuesday morning class, becomes a woman of legend. According to tradition, Serach is still around when Moses is born. She's very, very ancient, like in the 200s, 300 years range. And she's the keeper of the tales. She's the one who can tell Moses where Joseph is buried. She knows the secrets. So this is a very interesting woman that gets mentioned. I mean, it says there's other granddaughters, but she's the one that gets mentioned. Beriah, his sons were Heather and Malchiel. These were the descendants of Zilpah. Again, now the concubine, the secondary wives, whom Laban had given to his daughter Leah. These she bore to Jacob. And those totaled 16 people by the time they go. The sons of Jacob's wife, Rachel, were Joseph and Benjamin, who we've talked about already tonight, being the sons of Rachel. So the moms are really, really, really important. To Joseph were born in the land of Egypt, Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Osnath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, bore him. So they're not included in the list of people who go down because they're already down. They don't go down. They're already in Egypt. Benjamin, he's a pretty young guy, but he's been busy. He has Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Echi, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. That is quite a little brood of 10 children that Benjamin already has.
Wow.
His older brother, Benjamin's older brother, Joseph, full brother, has only 2. But here Benjamin's got a bunch of kids already. These were the descendants of Rachel who were born to Jacob, 14 people in all, most of them being Benjamin's sons. And now we get to the last group of children, the sons of Bilhah. Naphtali's sons, Yaziel, Guni, Yezer, and Shalem. These were the descendants. So Don son Hushim, and then Naphtali's sons. So these are the grandsons of Jacob through Bilhah. These 5 people and his 2 sons. These were the descendants of Bilhah, whom Laban had given to his daughter Rachel. These she bore to Jacob. And by the way, it doesn't say that Laban gave them to Jacob. It says they gave them to Rachel and to Leah, who then gave them to Jacob. But it wasn't Laban who gave them as wives. It was the daughters who gave them to Jacob to have kids with. So there's 7 of the Bilhahites, if you will, the Bilhah family. And so it says all the people belonging to Jacob who came to Egypt, his own issue, aside from the wives of Jacob's sons, all these people numbered 66. So for some reason, the wives, and it seems like maybe some of the other women, are not mentioned by name, or they're not counted. It says so. The 66 people that they counted are the 7 plus 14 is 21, plus 16, which is 37. And then we get to the Leah people, which are 33. So it's 33 plus 37, except you've got to subtract Joseph, his wife, and his 2 kids. So you get to 66. So some of the granddaughters are mentioned, or one of the granddaughters is mentioned. Some of the daughter-in-laws are mentioned, but the other women are not mentioned. They're not counted in the 70. So 70 people. Joseph's sons were born to him, so not counted. So he had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to point the way before him to Goshen. So when they came to the region of Goshen, Joseph ordered his chariot and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. He presented himself to him, embracing him around the neck. He wept on his neck a good while. So there it doesn't just say he cried on his neck, his dad's neck, but he cried on his neck a good time, a good long time. It was very, very powerful, the reunification. And Joseph, where does Joseph go to meet his father? He goes to Goshen, the area that the Israelites are going to, the family are going to settle in, which, by the way, seems to not be in the heartland of Egypt. It's its own area and seems to be a little bit closer. Now, it seems pretty apparent here that Joseph isn't really allowed to leave Egypt. Maybe he doesn't want to, but it also could be that he's not allowed to leave Egypt. That there's no way that Pharaoh is going to let Joseph out of his sight. Number one, he might be afraid that someone else will get Joseph. Some other king out there, if Joseph goes abroad, can be captured. And then they've got Pharaoh's good luck charm. So he doesn't want Joseph anywhere outside of his control. And it could be, again, that Joseph really was, to some extent, a captive of his own success. He couldn't leave. he could never go abroad. He definitely doesn't seem like he had, even if he had the power, he doesn't seem to have the ability to go visit his dad. But he still could have sent a messenger all those long years. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I can die, having seen for myself that you are still alive." Then Joseph said to his brother, and by the way, I mean, he thought he was dead. Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and tell the news to Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and my father's household who are in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds. They've always been breeders of livestock, and they have brought with them their flocks and their herds and all that is theirs. So when Pharaoh summons you and asks, what is your occupation? Your answer shall be, your servants have been breeders of livestock from the start until now, both we and our fathers, so that you may stay in the region of Goshen, for all shepherds are abhorrent to Egyptians." So, people have read this and said, is Joseph embarrassed by his brothers? I mean, he's the most powerful guy in Egypt besides Pharaoh, and his brothers are a bunch of shepherds. Now, that's probably not what happened, though it could be. But the key really is here, at least what Joseph says. I mean, Joseph could say this to keep their dignity, but it's also very possible that the Egyptians really didn't like shepherding because they worshiped sheep. Their god, their main god, Amun-Ra, the sun god, was represented as a sheep. And if you're a shepherd who walks around and treats sheep as a commodity and not a god, that could be a to'evah, which is the word that's used here. It's a to'evah for the Egyptians, which is by the same word that we use for unkosher, non-kosher things, abhorrent things, things that we're not supposed to do religiously. In our words, taboo. Egyptians think that shepherding is taboo. Not that they're looking down on it and saying, you're worthless shepherds, but that you're actually practicing something that's religiously, culturally, not something that they do. It's very fair that we just have a cultural disconnect here that he doesn't want his brothers to step into. And maybe staying in Goshen allows them, as Joseph seems to be saying here, if we're going to be shepherds, we got to stay in the land of Goshen. We can't go into the Egyptian heartland. So it's okay to be shepherds here in Goshen, but you can't do it near the Nile, for example. You can't do it in their holy cities. They're major metropolitan areas. Can't be a shepherd. So now let's look at this chapter. And this is the chapter, we're going to start getting into things here that, again, most people skip over. They read real fast. They don't really care about it. But there are actually some clues here, not just for the future of the Israelites in Egypt, but maybe for the future of the Jewish people for the next 3,000 years. So let's not run over it too fast. And we got here with about 40 minutes to spare. So let's dwell here in Goshen for a little bit for this last part. So we paid attention to the famous part of the story, the reunification story. But well, there's a little bit more reunification, but look what happens here economically. Then Joseph came and reported to Pharaoh, saying, my father and my brothers, with their flocks and herds and all that is theirs, have come from the land of Canaan, and we are now in the land of Goshen. So again, here it says livestock. Herds are a little different than necessarily saying, sheep. Shepherds are with sheep. This is maybe a little more. He doesn't lie to Pharaoh. He just says they have lots of flocks. Doesn't necessarily have to just be sheep. And selecting a few brothers, he presented them to Pharaoh. So he didn't make Pharaoh meet all the brothers. He met some of them. And sure enough, Pharaoh said to the brothers, "What is your occupation?" And they answered, "We are servants. We are servants, are shepherds, as were our fathers." Well, that's not quite what, what Joseph told them to say. Joseph told them to say, "We're breeders of livestock." That's what he said. Don't tell them you're shepherds. Tell them you're breeders of livestock. I mean, that could be cows, that could be chickens, that could be lots of things. It could be lots of animals. Doesn't have to be shepherds. What do the brothers do? We're shepherds. We're shepherds. We're shepherds. He's literally saying we're shepherds. We're your servants, right? But and they do say it's just what we do. It's what our fathers have done. So again, maybe that's also, don't hold us accountable to it for it. It's just what we do. It's what our families, that's what we're good at. "We have come," they said to Pharaoh, "to sojourn in this land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flock, the famine being very severe in the land of Canaan. Pray then, let your servants stay in the land of Goshen." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "As regards your father and your brothers who have come to you, the land of Egypt is open before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land. Let them stay in the land of Goshen. And if you know any capable men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." So Pharaoh doesn't have sheep, but he's got livestock. And he says, "You know what? If there are any good guys there, and if there are any capable guys in this group, I'll hire them myself." So again, most people pass over this part. I love this part because, especially now, because it tells you a little bit about the way people do business, even today, which is let's connect. Let's hook up. Let's network.
Mhm.
Your family are going to be able to benefit from this relationship. And Pharaoh is very grateful to Joseph, and I'm going to take care of your family. I'm not just going to take care of them. I'm going to give them jobs. And again, the fact that they came forward and said shepherds, he goes back to livestock.
Livestock.
So I just think it's funny too that the brothers couldn't help themselves and said the wrong thing. And you can just imagine Joseph just going like, I told them not to say that. I told them to say livestock. Joseph then brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh. And Jacob greeted Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked Jacob, "How many are the years of your life?" How many are the years? How old are you? It's a fancy way of saying how old are you? That's what he says to him. How old are you? And for those who remember this part, you get a good chuckle, but not in a laughter way, but in kind of a poignant way. Because look at Jacob's response. Jacob answered, "The years of my sojourn on the earth are 130. Few and hard have been the years of my life, nor do they come up to the lifespans of my fathers during their sojourns." So, Pharaoh asked, "How old are you?" And Jacob says, "I'm 130. But believe it or not, that's nothing compared to my father, by the way, who lived to be 180. And by the way, Jacob isn't dying right now. Jacob may think he's dying right now, but Jacob still has about 30 more years in this world. Not as many as his dad got, but quite a lot. He's getting pretty close to what his grandfather Abraham got. He's 130 right now. But more importantly, what he says to him is that it haven't been easy. My life hasn't been easy. Now Pharaoh with all due respect, didn't ask him that question. He didn't ask him, how's your life been? He asked him, how old are you?
Mhm.
And his answer is, I'm 130. And you can just imagine in a very Jewish way, but you should know from such surahs that I've had. You don't know. And he does the quintessential Jewish thing, which is, it's really been bad. You don't know. I've got a pain in my hip, and I've got so much surahs. And that's what he tells him. And you wonder what Pharaoh, literally the most important man in the world at that time, is thinking when this elderly Jewish man in front of him is saying, you don't know, I get up every morning and I can't go to the bathroom, and he just starts telling him. And it's, look, the reality is Jacob's life hasn't been easy, but he's standing in front of a guy right now who he knows already is going to take care of him. He doesn't have to get up in front of him and say, my life's really been not very good. But he does anyways. He offers that information to him. But it says that Jacob bade Pharaoh farewell. He left from his presence. So he says, goodbye, Pharaoh. I don't know what he expected. I mean, it's a weird interaction, but it gets weirder. Joseph settled his father and his brothers, giving them holdings in the choicest part of the land of Egypt, in the region of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. So clearly Ramses is a part of Goshen. It's named after the pharaohs, and there were several pharaohs named Ramses. We don't know whether this is named after Ramses II or Ramses IV, and there are people who argue over when it took place. Difficult to know. We don't know. And it's all very possible, though, that the Jewish people found themselves living in this part of Egypt, a little bit closer to the land of Israel, so it makes sense geographically. It also makes sense that this is an area that maybe Pharaoh felt more comfortable settling people who are not Egyptian in. Joseph sustained his father and his brothers and all his father's household with bread down to the little ones. Okay. That doesn't seem like a lot, except for the fact there's no bread in the whole world. For the famine was very severe. Both the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. So the family, his family, is all eating. But they wouldn't have eaten if they were back in Canaan. And more importantly, people aren't eating in Egypt. And this is where I'm telling you the story gets weird, very relevant, and maybe answers the question for why were the Jewish people hated so much by the almost said by the Germans, by the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
But the same thing happened in Germany. The Jews who made up the middle and wealthier classes of German society and Austrian society that survived World War I with their money and with their treasures, tremendous anti-Semitism. Look, not every Jew in Germany was wealthy in the 1920s. There were a lot of poor families, a lot. But there were also a lot of super wealthy Jewish families during this time. You know, it's ironic. A lot of people won't buy Mercedes because it's a German automobile, and the Mercedes Corporation ran slave labor camps during World War II. That's a fact. It's a fact. It's not an arguable, you can't argue it. But understand that the company was partly owned by a Jewish man who named the car Mercedes after his daughter. So understand that the company, and again, his family was persecuted during the war, and that family, Jelinek family, was, destroyed during World War II. But the irony, and most people don't know this, Mercedes is named after a Jewish girl.
I didn't know that.
So these people who were at the higher end of German society and disproportionately represented in the upper classes of German society, there were a lot of Germans who didn't like to see that. It doesn't excuse anti-Semitism, of course, but it explains why people looked at them and said, they're not suffering and they're not German. Now, that second part, by the way, is obviously hurtful and is the basis for anti-Semitism for thousands of years, which are the Jews are not us. They're not our people. And we know that it happens even in our own country. When people say, why are Jews so wealthy? Or why are Jews in this situation? They're not American, or they shouldn't have this. It happens today, folks. So I want to tell you the relevance of this. Keep in mind, if you think this is the bad part, we're not there yet, folks. We're going to see it in a couple lines. They had bread and the other people in Egypt didn't have bread. And it gets worse. Joseph gathered in all the money that was to be found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan as payment for the rations that were being procured. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's palace. So what did Joseph do? He took all the money that the people were paying him in Egypt and everywhere else where they were buying bread from him, from the Egyptians, from the grain houses that he created. He took all that money and he brought it into Pharaoh's palace. It didn't say he kept it, but he gathered it. Folks, this is the Jewish money lender. This is the Jewish tax collector. This is the Jew in charge of the money. The Egyptians are watching a Jew, an Israelite, go around according to the Torah and collect all their money. Folks, that's still not the bad part. It gets worse. And when the money gave out in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread or else we'll die before your very eyes. All our money is gone. You took our money in the first wave. We don't have anything. And so now we have Joseph as the pawnbroker. Pawnbrokers, folks. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know already. But during the 1920s and 30s in this country, people looked at the Jewish merchants and the Jewish pawnbrokers who were working in New York and Detroit and every other city where there were Jewish pawnbrokers. And not, of course, every pawnbroker was Jewish, but the ones who were, and there were a disproportionate amount of Jews that were involved in lending and in this type of business, didn't exactly make the Jews real popular in those communities. Folks, nobody likes to owe money to people. Langston Hughes, the great Harlem poet, has a poem that says the pawnbroker is a Jew. I mean, that's real, folks. That's a poem, a classic poem from one of Harlem's most legendary poets. Langston Hughes, the Jewish pawnbroker. And Joseph said, bring your livestock and I will sell you against your livestock if the money is gone. Now he didn't. They came to him, but it doesn't matter. Who's going to like Joseph and his people? They brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for their horses, for their stocks of sheep and their cattle and their asses and all that was provided. And thus he provided for them bread in exchange for their livestock. They pawned everything. Guess what? You still haven't gotten to the bad part. You still haven't gotten to the bad part. And when that year was ended, they came to him the next year and they said to him, we cannot hide from the Lord that with all the money and the animal stocks consigned to my Lord, nothing is left at my Lord's disposal, save us and our farmland. We don't have anything left. You got our money. You got our property, our possessions. Now you're going to get our property and us. Let us not perish before your eyes, both we and your land. Take us and our land in exchange for bread, and we will be your serfs to Pharaoh. Provide the seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become a waste. Is everybody with me right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going to show you something that you may never have seen before in the Torah. At Passover, we have a very famous phrase that we say over and over again in the Passover Seder. Avadim hayinu leFaro. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Folks, you just read in the Torah, the Egyptians became Avadim leFaro. The Egyptian people became slaves to Pharaoh in their own land. And it was Joseph who facilitated this. It's Joseph who stands there in the front of everybody telling him, okay, you've given me your money, you've given me your property, your possessions, and now you're a slave. You got nothing. You want to survive, but you're surviving at our good graces. So they translate it as serfs because essentially, as you're going to see, they set up they're not slaves per se, but they don't own their own lives. They're not in control of their own lives anymore. They've given up their freedom. And an Israelite, Joseph, is the one who orchestrated this whole thing. So I ask you, good people, is it so far-fetched that maybe some of the Egyptians didn't like Joseph and his people? They're not slaves to Joseph. They're slaves to Pharaoh. It says so. But it's Joseph who made it happen. Now he's only helping them survive. But did Joseph now become the most hated man in Egypt? Now they're begging for help. It's not that they're like Joseph comes to them and, hey, you want some food? Here's what, they come to him and beg him. But is Joseph essentially a victim of his own success? And by extension, do the Jewish people then pay the price for this? It's a horrible story.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a story that's been played out so many times in the past. But of course, there's also a story here about economic freedom, folks. What are people going to do if they become dependent and owned by the government? And whether knowingly or unknowingly, intentionally or unintentionally, do we become servants or slaves or beholden or dependent or lose our freedom when we make these deals.
Mhm.
Folks, I can't help but read this portion right now and think about what is going on in our country right now. How can you read it this year and not think about what's happening right now as we speak? Right now.
Mhm.
Now you could say everyone has good intentions. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm willing to concede it. But what are going to be the long-term effects of the economic decisions that we're making right now?
Not good.
I read this portion this week and I was shaking, because sometimes we read a portion that is so perfectly well suited for waking us up and making us think about how we're going to live our lives and how our country is going to shape its existence. You have to think about not just the immediate situation, but the long-term survival of our country as well. I hope we never forget that. I hope we never forget that the decisions that we make today are going to resonate long into the future. That somebody has to pay for the decisions that we make. And again, I don't have easy answers, folks. Joseph didn't have an easy answer. Joseph had an answer, and it was an answer that helped the people survive. But look at the destruction that it created. Look at the resentment that it created. And look at the fact that the Egyptian society ends up becoming torn apart. And nobody remembers what happens next. Because even if they remember this, which I guarantee you most people don't remember this, that the people sold themselves into slavery to Pharaoh to eat, to have one more meal. Look what happens. Joseph gained possession of all the farmland of Egypt for Pharaoh. Every Egyptian having sold his field because of the famine that was too much for him. Thus the land passed over to Pharaoh. So the government seized control of the land. They nationalized the land. That's what it said just now. You just read how it happened. They willingly did it. They graciously did it. They begged for it. But now they don't own their own land. Pharaoh did it. Pharaoh owns it, and Joseph did it. And if you think that that's the worst part of it, now you get it. Because what happens? It says that he removed the population town by town from one end of Egypt's border to the other. They forcibly moved the population in Egypt. People don't remember that.
I didn't.
That line is like, oh yeah, Joseph, I maybe knew that Joseph took control of everything, and they just repopulated and reorganized the whole country right out from under people. They took away literally their homes. If you don't think it can happen, it happened. Now you'd be saying, well, how do we know it happened? How do we know it? How do we know the Torah is just not telling us a story? Folks, there's not a lot of stuff that we can say happened exactly the way the Torah says it happened. And let's say for a second that we don't know that it was Joseph who engineered this socialism. I mean, this is the definition of collectivism, of socialism, of literally telling people you don't own anything. And we're going to tell you now where you get to live. because he did it. Or Pharaoh, we assume it's either Pharaoh or Joseph. I mean, the he isn't ascribed. But this is a social reorganization that the people had no control over. They had no power. They couldn't say no anymore. So not only did they lose their land, they lost their ability to control their fate. That's why, when we think of serfs, we think of people who work the land for a tenant. There's an owner of the land, and they're poor, but they get to, okay, fine. But that's not just what happened, because the people didn't even get to live where they wanted to live anymore. They lived wherever he wanted them to live. And the Torah says only the priests of the land of only the land of the priests he didn't take over. For the priests had an allotment from Pharaoh, and they lived off the allotment which Pharaoh had made to them. Therefore, they didn't sell their land. So the only people that don't get affected by this are the priests, the Egyptian priests. And Joseph said to the people, whereas I have this day acquired you and your land for Pharaoh, here is seed for you to sow the land. And here's the trick. And when the harvest comes, you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be yours as seed for the fields and as food for you, and those in your households, and as nourishment for your children. And so this is where it sounds a little bit like serfdom again, other than the fact that it just says yes, but they don't really have a choice of where they're going to be serfs. So it's a little bit more than serfdom. It's, we're sending you to where we think you should be. And so the system is the government gets 20%, right? 1/5 goes to the Pharaoh. Now, there are people who laugh when they read this because they say, well, that's not so bad, right? They only paid 20% taxes. I'm in the 35% tax bracket, right? There's people here now going, well, it's not so bad. You get to keep 4/5. That's true, folks. In the ancient world, if governments started taking more than a 1/5 from their people, the people would go to war and kill everybody. They'd start killing people for more than this. So yeah, 1/5 was a lot. And you can make the argument, well, what did they get for that? Well, they got an army, they got protection, they got their food, they got to live in their, they had their government infrastructure, whatever, roads and canals and whatever they had. So it's a 20% tax. I mean, maybe there were other taxes, by the way. It doesn't say that there weren't. But 1/5 of everything's now going back to Pharaoh. That's the deal. That's the serfdom or the agreement. Now, again, you ask, well, how do we know it happened? There's one line here. They said to, assumedly, Joseph, right? Could be Pharaoh, but it sounds like they're talking to Joseph. You have saved our lives. We are grateful to my Lord, and we shall be serfs. Or I again would say, V'chayinu avadim leFaro. Avadim hayinu leFaro. It's just in a different order. Avadim hayinu leFaro. We will be servants. We'll be slaves to Pharaoh. And again, you're going to say, but how do you know it's true? Because the Torah just tells us here. And Joseph made it into the law of the land, right? It's the rule in Egypt, which is still valid, that 1/5 should be Pharaoh's, and only the land of the priest did not become Pharaoh's.
Wow.
So the Torah just told us that when this story was told for the first time, whenever that was, I don't care when it was, if it was 3,200 years ago or 2,800 years ago, it's at least 2,500 years ago. This was still in place. This tax was still happening in the land of Pharaoh. Now you could say that we invented the story with Joseph as the one who's in charge of it. I don't know what to say to that. I have no proof. But what I do have proof is the Torah wouldn't say the law is still valid unless it was still happening during their time. It wouldn't say it. There's no reason to say that if it wasn't happening. So that means when the time of the Torah, past the time of Moses, the Egyptians were still living under this system of giving 20% of all that they earned back to Pharaoh. How long did it last for? How long were the Egyptians paying? We don't know. Generations, it seems like. At least from the time of Joseph to the time that this would have been written, at least past Moses' time. Hundreds of years. The Egyptians leveraged their future, folks, for hundreds of years during the famine. That's the takeaway from it. And that's 2020 Torah. What will we do? What will we be like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, because of the decisions that we make today? Folks, the only thing we can hope is that other countries are as suffering as much as we are financially and won't take this as an opportunity to get leverage on us. But what happens if another country, I don't know, let me just throw it out as a possibility. China maybe ends up buying up our debt. This new debt that we just took on.
We still have the alternative of opening everything again instead of closing down the stores.
Notice at this stage, that's already a moot point, because the point is that we've now got another few $1 trillion total in debt that we're in.
Yeah.
So if we don't come up with a solution, what prevents another country from buying that debt and essentially doing what Joseph and Pharaoh did, which is own us? But I mean, I'm telling you, in my mind, and I don't think I'm a prophet, I am telling you that my guess is, and we're going to have a really tough justification for it, but I'm sure we will come up with it. But my guess is that when we go to war with China, which I think will probably be inevitable, we're not going to go to war over a place.
Mm-mm.
We're not going to go to war with China. That may be the pretext. It may be in Japan. It may be in Vietnam. It may be in India. But that won't be the real reason. The reason we're going to go to war with China, folks, one day is to make them forgive the debt that we have to them.
Mhm.
God willing, we'll win that war.
Yeah.
But that war that will be fought in the future by us, a democratic country, will be essentially to recapture the debt that we have. I'm almost positive of that. I don't see any other way, folks. I really don't. And I'm not advocating for the war. Believe me, I really don't want to fight a war over money or over another part of the world that probably is already going to be a disaster by the time we get there. But wherever that war is, could be in the Middle East. Who knows where the China, but probably some country that borders China. That war will really be calculated by us as a war to get us out of this tremendous debt we owe to China. And that we'll calculate that it's cheaper for us to go to war and defeat China in a battle than it is to pay that money.
I think you're right.
I hope I'm wrong, but I really don't see it not happening, because that's the way things have gone for thousands of years of human history.
Mhm.
And I don't think we're any different than anybody else. So please, please, please let me be wrong, because that's going to be a horrific war. It could be a horrific war. Any war is horrific, but that could be a horrific war. And I hope it doesn't happen, folks. I hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, just remember, all of the things that we're doing now are setting that into motion.
Yeah.
And it's much better not to be in debt, especially to a country that is not a democratic country, is a country that would think nothing about having more leverage and control over us. And again, as you know, I've been to China 5 times since 2016. So I haven't been there in a little over a year, but I've been there almost every year since, at least once a year. I have great respect for the people there. I have great belief in their country's abilities to do things if they ever decide to be free. And I have a great belief in, I love their food. No, I don't like every Jew. I like Chinese food, but I do. In all seriousness, I'm not advocating for it, but I will tell you, as much as I spent time there getting to know, I will tell you, they'll think not even a second about exercising their will over us, and they'll do it with the full intention of doing what they feel is right and what they feel are owed. So, I'm not telling us that we should go to war with China. I'm not telling us we should be not nice to people in China. I'm cultivating relationships with the Chinese myself, not because I'm scared of them or because I'm wary of them, but because I think there's a lot of goodness and possibilities there. And this is a country, by the way, I've told you before, that's always treated its Jewish community with respect. The Jews of Kaifeng were not ever persecuted in the 800 years of their history. They assimilated out. They never were persecuted. No record of persecution. But I will tell you, it's for them, it's the power that they believe that they're owed. As the largest populations in the world, they believe they're owed it. Just remember that, folks.
Mhm.
This was still the law in the land of Egypt to this day. And the last line is, of course, a hopeful line. Israel settled in the country of Egypt in the little region of Goshen. They acquired holdings in it and were very fertile and increased greatly. Pru Urvu, from the very beginning of Genesis, they fulfilled the biblical mission of being fruitful and multiply. Very much so. Me'od. It ends on a very happy note. But again, you saw some stuff that happened there that wasn't just disastrous for our ancestors in Egypt. Sowed the seeds of jealousy and hate and discrimination. But oh my, has it been rained down on us in the last 3,000 years. And unfortunately, again, even in our own country and in our own lifetime, we've seen persecution and hatred of Jews for their success. And again, some of us have felt it individually, personally, and it's unfortunately part of the reality of our lives. Wish it wasn't, and
we just recently saw what could happen so quickly to a prosperous country like Venezuela that had resources and oil and got themselves.
It was one of the most stable countries in Latin America. The Jewish community in Venezuela, in particular, was a community that enjoyed great stability, not a lot of problems. Sure enough, with Chavez, they had a lot of fear. They had fear for their lives. They had fear for their economic safety. And a lot of them made Aliyah. A lot of them went to Israel. A lot of Venezuela's Jews got out. And a lot of them moved to Miami. They came up north to our neck of the woods because they didn't want to risk being killed there. And so, it's a country that was devastated in a short period of time. But again, oftentimes we do get to see what happens when a country goes through social upheaval, what happens to their Jewish community. And it's usually, even in a country like Venezuela, where it's not a huge Jewish community, oftentimes the first ones that feel that persecution are the Jewish minority. So they felt it in Argentina and other parts of South America when there was economic upheaval, but it was not just in Nazi Germany and in Europe, but we've seen it too many times in history. We saw it in Spain. I mean, the Inquisition was partly religious, but a lot of it was because the Jews were in financial control of Spain. When Isabella and Ferdinand came to power, they owed the Jews a lot of money for their wars against their other parts of Spain as they were unifying it and kicking out the Muslims. They owed the Jews a lot of money. It was much cheaper to kick them out than it was to pay them. And remember that economic lesson again for us. Listen, I hope again we get through the next few days safely. I don't have easy answers for people other than again, I want you all to stay safe, and I want us all to stay safe as a country. I want us all to stay safe and secure as a community. There's a lot of stuff to get us down, and we need to find that stuff that brings us up. And one of the most important things is to look forward to the future. I'm had several friends who've been lucky enough to be vaccinated. I will be getting vaccinated as soon as I can. And again, I'll do my part to try to keep everybody healthy, and we'll definitely do our parts to keep our parts to be uplifted. But man, the Torah spoke to me this week in a way that shook me to my core, because I never pay attention to this last chapter. Honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. I try to read through the end of chapter 40, or pretty much chapter 47. I read through it pretty fast. Usually, not this year, not when I saw the redistribution of what happens in that story, and what we can learn from it in our own day. Again,
Can I ask, are you still picking up mail at the temple? I want to send something to
Harvey Kale. That's a question for Harvey Kale.
Twice a week.
Are you still picking up mail there?
Twice a week.
Twice a week. Okay.
Harvey is our intrepid mailman.
Harvey the mailman.
Mailman, right.
Harvey really, and in all seriousness, Harvey goes there too to take care of the flowers. And I got to tell you, Harvey planted those flowers. He's tending those flowers. I wish you could all see him. It's we got to do something about the grass, Harvey. We got to raise money to put in turf, because Harvey, you made the rest of it look so good.
The front lawn is done. When was the last time you saw the front lawn?
I saw the front lawn. I'm talking about in the inside, under the awning.
If you want it done, we can get it done. The problem is it's not very thick and dirt. We can get it done. Let me talk to the gardener.
I saw the pictures of the pet service the other day. I was looking through our last year. I was doing kind of a year-end reflection, and unfortunately, it didn't look as bad when the rest of the stuff looked not so good. Now that you've done such a great job, now we have to fix. We have to fix. No, Harvey really did an amazing job planting in the planter areas outside and on the sides. The stuff has come in so beautifully. So now we have to get that stuff done some way. I don't know what the answer.
I'll talk to the gardener.
But thanks and by the way, Harvey's not just tending the grass, but he's tending our finances, because he's gotten us through a really, really tough year. You all did that. Everybody who donated and took care of membership and took care of making donations, you all did that. But Harvey was the steward of that. He was the Joseph, if you will. The only difference is that he didn't leverage us to the we take control. He's done it without, well, I wouldn't say borrowing, because we did get PPP money, but we didn't go to the bank for a loan. We didn't leverage we still own our building 100%.
Good.
And he's done an amazing job of stewarding our money.
Thank you.
He's a responsible steward. So thank you, everybody.
So we'll call him Harvey the Steward Mailman.
You're right.
Gardener, the steward. No, but he really has been amazing. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for making this last, this is our last, next week will be our last class of the year. It will be the 30th. And we will have class next week, because we got to read the last chapter of Genesis. So I want everybody to be here for that. God willing, we all stay safe and healthy over this next week too. There really are a lot of people in our synagogue that are finally again battling. So we have a couple of people in the hospital. Please do stay safe and healthy, and do what you have to do to be well, and most importantly, to stay positive and to stay uplifted. Don't let, we're so close to getting people out. I hope that, please make it through this last part. They always say it's darkest before the dawn, but if that's the case, we probably have some tough weeks ahead of us, but we will get through this.
Good.
And there is a light at the end of the tunnel here, folks, for us. There really is.
It's a long tunnel, though.
It is. It is. It was a long tunnel. But you know what? I can tell you that the amount of time in front of us is less than the time behind us. I really do believe that. May still be, 5-6 months or whatever, 4 or 5 months, but we'll have people out, I hope, real soon. And hopefully at least we'll have better news for the rates of infection, in the next few weeks too. So again, the people I know who've had I know several people, several doctors who've gotten it, including our good friend, Dr. Mike. I say Dr. Mike because he never comes on our classes, but he's there for Shabbat sometimes. It's his anniversary today, so I wish him in absentia happy anniversary, Dr. Mike. He got his last Thursday, and he's doing just fine. So don't be afraid of getting it either, folks, because everybody who I've talked to has been fine. So if you can't, you can't. If you're like Joyce and it's going to cause maybe some worse problems, don't do it. But don't avoid getting it if you have a chance.
Okay.
All right, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good to see everybody. It's great to
Thank
see you
you.
all. It's wonderful to see you all.
Wonderful
All
to
right.
be here.
All right. Bye. We love you.